Brian, let's bring in Comac now. By 2029, the company intends to reach an annual output of 200 C919 narrow-body jets. To what extent will that bolster its position against what remains this duopoly?
Simple. That's 200 fewer airplanes that China will buy from Boeing or Airbus. It's math. It's math. And when they do 250 or whatever later on, it'll be 250. This is something that, as soon as they announced they were going to make this airplane, as soon as they could, you were going to start to lose market share. And I would submit that over time, you could take whatever the global growth outlook is in the world for commercial aircraft, and you can subtract 1 point or 1% for both Boeing and Airbus, because China will build its own stuff. Long term, could China get into the international market? Have they had a couple deliveries?
That's right.
Oh, well, I'm not even talking about the wide bodies, even narrow bodies, okay? Now, Comac's offering right now is this. Okay, looks like an old 737 because that's what it's based off of, and maybe it's not as good, but we'll sell it to you for half the price. And price has a beauty all its own. So at the very least, Boeing and Airbus should grow 1% faster than the overall market over time, because China represents about 20% of the market, and they're going to be buying from themselves.
So does the competitive challenge and the rubber really hit the road in terms of Comac being a force to be reckoned with only in, let's say, the early to mid 2030s? Because you've got to give it some time for the aircraft to prove themselves commercially and from a safety point of view.
It'll take time, but you go back as late as the 1970s. Sears was considered a powerhouse U.S. retailer. Okay, there was this thing called Walmart. It was in small towns. These things do take time. They do take decades, but they do happen. So, China was making gunpowder about 1,000 years before my ancestors, right? They haven't proven to be particularly stupid. So, over time, there are reasons that could keep them from being a really effective global competitor, but they'll fly planes. They'll fly planes in China. They'll sell some of their planes before that to countries that are willing to buy at a lower price and not get all the cost and efficiency advantages. But over time, they could pose a greater threat. But that won't be in the next 5 years. I don't see that. Not in the next 5 years.
I see. So what do you think Comac could bring to the table in terms of the value proposition and a USP for its jets, whether it's narrow bodies or the wide bodies? And what would perhaps give it the edge? Is it going to be on price, or is it going to be other qualitative issues?
So let's talk about the plane that exists, the narrow body. Hi, I'm not as good, but I'm cheap and I'm available. Bam. That's the pitch. Okay? The wide body, well, it's got to fly first, then we'll see.
What about price? Does it really come? So your point is it comes down to price. So other issues like efficiency and operational efficiency and safety are going to be secondary.
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at an airplane, okay, your big chunks of content are the engines and the avionics, which China has to buy from the West. Okay, they'll have some advantage in terms of manufacturing costs because Chinese machinists are cheaper than Western machinists. But the pitch really is this: a 737 or an A320 might run you about $100 million. A Comac will run you $50 million. There's enough in the price there for someone to go and say, okay, maybe it's not quite as well designed. It's less proven. You don't have if you put down a 737 or an A320 at any airport, there's a price there. There's a machine shop that is approved to do repair work. The the service and repair network for Comac is not going to be there yet. So there are real reasons for big, efficiently driven airline to pay up for a Boeing or an Airbus. So you got to make it cheap enough for somebody to buy it. That doesn't mean that the 737 is twice as good, but it's better, and you've got the service network. It's all there. You've got the center in Connecticut where, for example, both GE and Pratt & Whitney have global operation centers where they're monitoring every single engine in the air in real time. And if I'm United Airlines, I'm Scott Kirby, I'm like, how are my engines doing? I can call them up and ask.
Brian, do you foresee a situation where Comac jets could be in time what BYD is now for the global EV market?
That's a great question, and I haven't directly thought about it that way. I think that the challenge, though, would be much greater. On the EV side, China strategically went after the supply chain you need to produce, right? And by the way, somebody was in China doing this first, Elon Musk, so they learned from that. With aircraft, it's a little different. Again, they can bend metal, they can put it together, but those aren't Chinese engines. Those are either American engines, or they could be a French engine. So the engines and the avionics are where they're behind, and that would be the gap they would need to close to have a chance to do that. But even then, it's not a volume business, right? I mean, yeah, there's volume, but this isn't like you're going to be doing millions of units of aircraft per year. So that's a great question. I know I'm going to think about it more after today.